Tyranids and Kill Team, they're kind of like pets that you put on the table. Welcome back to Beeranid 40K. A long time ago I made a video on basic melee tactics for Kill Team, and we're revisiting that now with an eye on Tyranids because there's a need for an update. Basically, some things have changed in the FAQ, Metabolic Overdrive is completely different, things like that. Now this video isn't just for Tyranid players, it's going to focus on Tyranids. All of the examples given are probably going to be Tyranids, but even shooting teams can benefit from this. Tip number 1 is to use intervening terrain and then pile in and fight. Now, a lot of people don't quite utilize this to its full extent, and it can save your life. Normally, if you charge, you fight first in the fight phase, but an enemy can spend some CP to hit first. If an enemy spends some CP for that decisive strike to attack first and he does not pile in, he'll be at a -1 to hit if there is intervening terrain between the two models. So when you make a charge, if possible, you get in, you have something kind of there between you, and then that way if they strike first, if they don't think about it, if they don't utilize their pile-in move, that 3 inches to get around it, you do it when it's your turn, and basically when it's your turn to swing, you move base to base with your pile-in, and you fight at the full weapon skill. And speaking of pile-ins and consolidations, one of the great things about Tyranids is the fact that the Hormagaunts have a 6-inch pile-in and consolidation. If you look at the stats, I think you'll agree with me when I say that my theory on Hormagaunts is that they are not there to kill. Instead, they act as a delivery system for bigger bugs, or they tie up big scary enemy guns so that they don't get a chance to shoot. This works because there's basically 3 types of ways to get into base to base, basically. It's not just charging. You can make a charge, that's number 1, but you can also pile in or consolidate. Those are the kind of main ways to get within 1 inch, and it means that something's not going to be able to shoot that turn. It means that next turn they're not going to be able to get to shoot. The reason that you don't always want to charge is because if you do charge, that means that you might get shot with Overwatch. But if I can get a big bug, a scary kind of bug, and a Hormagaunt in range of another guy that I'm going to charge first, something like a Flamer, something like that, I don't want to charge that. I can go kind of what's nearby to him, get into that, and then pile in and consolidate in. The easiest way to do that is when the killier bug gets his kill, then the Hormagaunt activates to pile in. Because he charged, he can activate in the fight phase. He just has to move towards the closest enemy model. He doesn't have to get to within 1 inch of an enemy model. He's not going to be able to fight, but he can still pile in. And if he gets to within 1 inch of an enemy in this way, he stopped them shooting next turn. He ruined the next turn shooting phase. You can usually make the Hormagaunts even better at being able to make charges by giving them the adrenal glands for that +1 to advance in charge rolls. It helps them get in first, make it safer for a more valuable bug to get in. Valuable bug makes the kill, and then the Hormagaunt piles in for next turn into a big gun, stopping him from shooting, or to get in base to base so that the more valuable bug isn't getting hit with Overwatch now that he's moving in. Now, one of the things that I showed in the past still applies. It's even more important now because charges over long distance are kind of harder to get in with the nerf to Metabolic Overdrive and all that. All of this from the last video still applies. Near choke points, keeping things from falling back, stuff like that. Charge cycling is important. Again, actually making a kill takes so many steps. It takes a lot more steps than just getting base to base. So if there's a gun that you don't want to be able to shoot, you want to keep something maybe locked in combat another turn, something like that, the best thing you can do is charge cycle. Models with big guns don't tend to be also great in melee. There are some exceptions. The Tyranid Warrior is one of them. But most are not going to be also great in melee as well as having a big scary gun. And that's where this strategy comes in. If you get a single model to charge, the enemy doesn't get to shoot this turn. And if he falls back next turn, he can't shoot again, unless he has fly. So in many cases, just getting 1 charge means that you've killed an opponent's model, a big scary gun, for at least 2 turns. And that is huge because a tournament game is only 4 rounds. So 1 charge can potentially, with this 4-point model, can potentially kill a model, an enemy model, without taking it out of action for half the game. But charge cycling is where we get this to become even better. Because if you keep a buddy nearby, you can keep that enemy gunner locked in even longer. You didn't have to hit them. You didn't have to wound them. You didn't have to pass through their save. You didn't have to go through a 50-50 injury roll. You just go kind of back and forth, charging one in, falling one back. Next turn, charge the one that fell back last turn, in again, fall back with the one from last turn that charged. And you just keep this cycling, this back and forth and back and forth. And what it does is it lets you kill big scary guns with pure positional play. There's no dice really involved other than the charges, which you can re-roll if you need to, stuff like that. If you set it up right, you can be at the right ranges, 7 inches or under, stuff like that. It's very powerful, and it's a way to get around the RNG of the game because this is pure positional. And it's one of the things I love about melee teams is how you can get to where you don't necessarily have to rely on the dice with certain builds and with certain strategies. Another thing that's huge for Tyranid players we have to take advantage of more and more with the lack of Metabolic Overdrive now is the Predatory leap tactic for 1 CP, which gives your charger the fly keyword for that charge. Is somebody on top of a giant building? Is somebody wrapped by terrain where you'd have to make like a 12-inch charge or something that is unreliable, statistically improbable? You could roll the dice and hope, or you can pay 1 CP to put fly on him and to just go over anything without measuring the vertical distance and stuff like that. It's very powerful, and it's something that you really want to make use of right now, especially with the loss of Metabolic Overdrive as a charge vector. The next tip I have, the next thing I'll say is that basically for me at this point, the only veteran that I really care about is the Lictor. If the Lictor veteran isn't the right veteran for the job, I probably won't run a veteran, period. This comes after the Las Vegas Open, where if you watch the footage, you'll see me get tabled on stream after making a successful turn 1 charge. Something like 6 inches up, all this inches over, I made a veteran move, way over, Predatory leap flew up, and I locked up an Eldar Guardian and a shooting platform, their weapon system, turn 1. Now, Raveners, they have great movement, they have a lot of attacks, but it all comes down to a 50-50 on that injury roll. A Lictor has 2 damage on their basic weapons. So instead of that Ulthway FNP saving them and stuff like that, or only having the 50-50 on the injury roll, it would be better to have a model there that is hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, and has 2 dice rolling for that 4-up on the injury roll. Another beautiful thing about the Lictor as a veteran, and why I think that he is one of the best veterans, is the fact that he has flesh hooks at strength 6. One of the things that I value most about the Lictor is the flesh hooks, because the biggest danger to a veteran is that you pay the CP to get them up there, and then the enemy pays a CP to charge them first before you can charge, or they just win initiative and then they get a charge, which means that you would need to pay a CP to decisive move. It's just a messy kind of situation. But with the flesh hooks, you have Overwatch with the Lictor at strength 6. Very valuable because it's wounding a lot of things in the game on 2s, and things that are tougher than that, most other things, it's going to be on 3s. But some of the biggest, baddest stuff in the game right now, which is the Admech and the Eldar, you would actually be wounding on 2s. But let's say that your flesh hooks Overwatch failed you. They get in and they're still at full health. Well, he can shoot that again. That's the beauty of the flesh hooks, is that he gets to shoot them as normal in the shooting phase, even if he's within 1 inch of an enemy, even if there's an enemy nearby. It's just if he charged, he cannot. But if he got charged, he can. So he gets 2 more shots, hitting on 4s at strength 6, basically, to, again, wound a lot of things on 2s. But there's another chance. This is not the end of the line for the Lictor. If even that, say it puts a flesh wound on or something like that, and the enemy model that charged is still standing, well, you can pay 1 CP for single-minded annihilation. A lot of people think that this is 2 CP. It's 2 CP for a warrior. The Lictor is not a warrior. For everything else, it's 1 CP other than the warrior and the hive guard. So paying 1 CP gives you an additional two more shots that he gets at strength 6, hitting on 4s. It's very good, and a lot of times it can wipe something out before they get a chance to strike back at you first. So that's a potential 7 shots that can wound on 2s on your Lictor if they charge into him. And yes, as I just mentioned, a warrior can double tap as well. It costs more, as I just said, but it's worth considering because you would be double tapping on the flesh hooks and their venom cannon or death spitter or whatever else you have them armed with. So that's a lot of DACA right there from one bug. And it kind of starts to be where you get kind of your points out of them at that point. Because it would be, instead of D3 shots from that venom cannon, it would be 2 D3. And instead of 2 shots with the flesh hooks hitting on 4s, it would be 4. Now, another very important tactic is the up and atom tactic from the combat specialist. It's been ruled at several tournaments here in the US that up and atom tactic is viable even if your model is not originally eligible to fight. So you would pay a CP and then you would get 3 inches of movement towards the closest enemy model, which means you could be hiding out of LOS, wait till that phase is over and you're safe, and now it's the combat phase, you get to activate him and move to put an extra, say, 3 inches off of next turn's charge, or you could actually come in physical base-to-base contact. And since you didn't declare a charge, it doesn't stop you from actually fighting what you make it base-to-base with, as it would if you had made a charge. Because normally if you make a charge, you can only fight what you declared a charge that turn, or what charged you. If you did not, and you find yourself in base-to-base with an enemy, you can fight that enemy. So it's something that's emerging as a tactic now. We'll see how much of an effect that it has on the game, but it's something that is repeatedly kind of being ruled at tournaments to be able to work this way. And so it's something that maybe you could start trying out in your games. Another very, very important tactic for melee armies is the fact that your own models, friendly models, or enemy models and things like that can provide obscured penalties to the opponent as they're trying to shoot you. So if you have 2 models stacked up and you declare a charge with the back one, the guy's only able to take you out on a 5 or a 6 on that injury roll instead of a 4, 5, and 6 because they're at a -1 penalty. Now, a few more tips if you're going to be playing Tyranids or just melee in general. First thing I would suggest is to consider positional secondaries and focusing on positional primaries. Tyranids have a lot of killy, but if you approach them with the thought that Tyranids are not meant to kill, I think you'll be a lot happier in your games. Hormagaunts and things like that, it's built for positional play, and it takes the positional play to be able to get your killy stuff in there a lot of times and to do well with it. So if you build your lists and you build your play style and your strategy for, say, a tournament or a game or something like that around the positional things that you can do, I think you'll have a lot more success as a Tyranid player. It feels like every time that I try to go killy with Tyranids, it's a bad experience for me, where if I go more positional, I do really well. Again, that doesn't mean to completely ignore killing. Right now, the format that we're all playing is hold 1, hold more, kill 1, kill more is how you score on your primary victory points, just like the ITC and Big 40K. So you do need to get kills, but that's going to be stuff like your Tyranid warriors, your lictors, stuff like that. But simply put, positional play has less RNG. Like I talked about before, you want that gun to not be there shooting at you, get somebody in combat. It's a lot better than needing to be in range, rolling to hit, rolling to wound, they get a save, then there's the injury roll. If you can just do it positional, you can get them out of the way with just getting within 1 inch. It's a lot less steps. And with that in mind, the next thing that I would suggest is to start adding some shooting to your lists. I keep trying to run pure melee Tyranids, and as soon as I put some Termagants in there, I start to have a lot more success. That was one of the biggest things I wish I had at LVO, was just even like 3 more of the Devourer Termagants. They don't seem insane, but they've always pulled their weight for me. And the fact of the matter is they can be standing on an objective and contribute offensive potential to their team, whereas a Hormagaunt probably won't. If they're just standing on an objective out in the open or something, they're going to get shot and it might not be the best. They want to be on an objective in melee with something that's not very killy, maybe a gun or something like that. That's where they want to be on those objectives. They don't want to just stand there. So because of the fact that you might have times where you do need to just hold an objective, you probably want to start putting some Termagants in your list. I like the Devourers on them. It's twice the price, but double or triple the output, basically. And there's just the simple fact that there's been some good points made by my friend Zero Stride and things like that, that you do not want wasted phases. We can affect the psychic phase. Even though we don't have psychic abilities, we have shadow in the warp, so we're giving a debuff at least. We're contributing something to that phase. And it's important that you don't just give away the shooting phase and be somebody's punching bag for 10 minutes because it can go very badly. So even if it's not the best shooting, even if they're better at shooting than you, it's better to still be rolling some dice in that phase. So take a few Termagants, put them in your list, and try them out. Let me know how they do for you. Next thing I would say is don't just hide your leader. A leader loses value in terms of a CP farm as the game progresses. Turn 1, you get 1 CP from him. There's 3 more CP left that he can give you that turn. So if you lose him turn 1, oh no, that's a big loss. You lost 3 CP. But if you lose him turn 3, he only had 1 more CP to give you. If you lose him turn 4, he already gave you all of his CP. So hiding your leader unnecessarily is something that I'm starting to move away from, especially with Tyranids, because the warrior gunner, for example, which is a very common leader for the Tyranid teams, is just so good in melee. He's good at shooting, and if you start to be bold with him in the mid game, like say start of turn 3, it's almost like you just got a 20-something point model out of reserves or something. So you really start to get more use out of him. You maximize the points that you spent bringing him. If you start to play him in the later games, if you start to be aggressive with your leader from turn 3 onwards. With that said, kind of a funny thing, I would also say don't be afraid to hide. And I'm not just talking about your leader. I'm just saying everything. Don't be afraid to hide. Even if a bug, say, has 3 wounds, 4 wounds or something, a lot of times they only have a 5-up save. In a single round of flamers, that could, take that entire bug down, no problem, and he's going to cost half the points that your big bug cost. So live to fight another day. Don't be afraid to do it. Look for blind spots. Look for ways to charge out of line of sight. Stack your guys like I was talking about so that you can make a charge from the guy in the back, only going out of action on a 5 if the Overwatch nukes you. These are the kinds of things that'll help you to be a better Tyranid player. And it's so fun. It's so tactical. I think that it's one of the best ways to play, even if it's not always the strongest way to play. I think shooty hordes are really good, which Tyranids can do if you start going, with your Termagants and stuff like that. But melee is a lot of fun, and melee Tyranids are a lot of fun. It's just that we've needed to adapt because of the change to the 125 points level, making our rosters tighter, the loss of Metabolic Overdrive, the fact that hold and kill is now meaning that your squishy 4-point guys that you would just stand on objective with are now potentially free kill points. There's a lot there. So things are changing for the Tyranids, but this is where I'm at this point. This is what I think, I would tell you to keep in mind at this point as we move forward into this new meta and this new year, 2020. And I wish you guys all the very best with your Tyranids. Leave me a comment below. Let me know if this helped you. And I'll be back again soon. This is Beeranid 40K, signing off. Before I go, a special thanks to you Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Alan Allred, Alec, Alexander Zhidkov, Andrew Chung, Andrew Erlinson, Anthony Hosking, Brendan Campbell, Brian Beck V-Scrub, Brian Stice, Chris Anzadula, Chris Hannon, Curtis Roberts, Cedric Morant, Dagger X, Dale Schultz, Daniel Figueiredo dos Santos, David Smireski, Eric Jackson, Eric Lewison, Eric Neguera, Eric Brandsness, Franklin Hurthawk, Jack Horton, Jared Reck, Jason E. Sanders, Jimmy D., John Miners, Juhani, Justin Saldana, Kevin Stiegseger, Laird Robinson, Lowell Ginsberg, Marcus Macabre, Marcus Regal, Matthew Fong, Nathan Klein, Oft Kilted, Patrick, Paul J. Mardisich, PHDX, Ryan Rambaquelli, Robert Kranz, Ryan Goodman, Sebastian Kling, Shane, Sheldon Steer, Snuffleupagus Hugs, Stephen Pachel, Stephen Kamai, Thomas Christian Cockanger, Tony Samana, Veeth Ulk, Zachary Bacchus, and Zorkam. I apologize if I butchered any of your names, but you do mean the world to me. Thank you so much for helping keep the channel alive.